Hi,
Okay.
everybody. I'm Chris Metzler, one of the programmers at SF DocFest. And as you can see, we're still living in this kind of weird hybrid world of film festivals where we're screening some films both in person and virtually. And we're lucky enough to have a really wonderful film, I Get Knocked Down, screening here. And you've just had a chance to see it. And we're lucky enough to have one of the directors here, Dunstan Bruce. Welcome, Dunstan.
Hello there. Good evening.
Good morning here and good evening to you. It's so neat to have this film as part of the festival. As you know, we had a chance to see it last year when we were kind of excited to bring it into one of our festivals, but we had to kind of hold our horses a little bit as you premiered at South by Southwest this spring. So congratulations, and we're excited to kind of ride the coattails of South by Southwest success. Maybe a good place to start is, what inspired you that you're like, okay, it's time to make a film?
Okay. I think part of what the film is about is it's a few different films in one. One of those is that it's about trying to tell the story of Chumbawamba, the untold story, the fact that the band had existed for 15 years before that song was a hit. And so I think a lot of people probably don't know that about the bands, that we had this whole anarcho, squatting, punk, troublemaking history that is a story that isn't told about Chumbawamba. A lot of people just know the song, particularly in America, in the States. It felt like that people just knew that one song. And so the first thing was that I didn't want the story of Chumbawamba to get lost in history, and people not to know that there was this much bigger story and Tub Thumping was a really, really tiny part of that whole story. So that was the first thing. That was like an important part of the thing. The other thing was I personally had reached the age of 50, and I was wondering, what do I do in my life? Where do I go? What do I do? How do I stay relevant? How do I stay visible? It was all questions like that. And I wanted to make a film that also questioned, what do you do as you get older? To try, if you want to change the world, how do you carry on doing that? And how do you keep yourself motivated and stuff like that? So I wanted to try and make a film that explored that idea as well.
Well, I think you did a great job of, weaving those elements together. And one of the things that I just find so charming about the film, and so, with the kind of creative approach that you took, I mean, at what point in time did you kind of decide this is the way to tell the story? Some documentaries are really scripted ahead of time. Other ones, it's just more of like you kind of ride the wave of life. So, like, what was the kind of creative process for the film like, and when did you kind of realize that was kind of how you wanted to tell the story?
I think I'd made a couple of music documentaries prior to this one. I'd watched a hell of a lot of music documentaries over the years, and I'd always thought, I don't want to make a Talking Heads archive sort of film that sort of just told the potted history of the band. I wanted to do something different. I think there's a few documentaries that I was sort of inspired by. One of which was there's a Nick Cave documentary called 20,000 Days on Earth, which I think is a brilliant documentary, which is completely scripted from start to finish, I believe. I think, and I really like the idea of that. But also the Anvil documentary, which I just think is a brilliant love story about these two guys and that. And I just thought, so it was those sort, and a lot of the Julian Temple documentaries. There's one about Wilko Johnson and Dr. Feelgood, stuff like that. I like those sort of documentaries where you had a character in the band who was the vehicle to tell a story, and a story that was much bigger than just being about in a band. And so I liked that about those documentaries. So I thought, but I started off just wanting to make a documentary about what do you do when you enter the mainstream as a political band? Can you achieve anything? When I met Sophie, the co-director of this film, she was like, well, that's great. She had come from a completely different background. She's a filmmaker first. She's not a musician. She's not as embroiled in music as what I am. So her approach was like, look, this story's got to have a human element. It's got to have stuff that everybody can relate to. It can't just be a film for musicians. It has got to have a much wider remit. And so it was funny when we were making it. She'd be always like, I'd be like, oh, this bit's brilliant. We've got to put this bit in. And she would be like, look, there's only 8 people who are going to think that is funny. And that's the 8 people in the band. You know, it just meant nothing to her. So what was brilliant working with somebody else, co-directing a film, was that we brought completely different things to the film. And that was so, you know, like I'd turn up one day with the baby head thing. I'd be like, look what I found. You know, EMI Japan made these for us. And so Sophie would be like, well, we've got to use it somehow. How can we use it? You know, what can we do with it? And we always had this sort of creative process. We were trying to think about the film scene by scene and always do something different and kind of follow the philosophy of what Chumbawamba was about, really, is that we never tried to make the same album twice. And I think me and Soph took that sort of philosophy with the film and thought, let's not film the same scene twice. Let's not just make everything, you know, like, you know, that we film each interview in a room with one of those cloudy backgrounds behind them. You know, let's do something different with everyone. And so we were always trying to think of new ways. And all that meant was that it was just really fun making the film. And we pushed ourselves, you know, creatively to come up with things that were like unusual for a music documentary. So I think what we've ended up with is a film that a lot of documentary purists might not actually like, because the film is not, it doesn't fit into a particular genre. And we jump around all over the place, you know, like we go into different, you know, we use different ideas all the time. I love that about the film. And I think that's in keeping with what Chumbawamba would have done, or what a Chumbawamba album sounds like. It goes from folk to punk to you know, to dance music, however. It jumps about all over the place. And I think we tried to do that with the film as well.
Yeah, I like the kind of whimsicalness in some ways of the, you know, the vibe, but yeah, obviously some kind of underlying much kind of bigger themes. You know, it's interesting you mentioned about collaborating with your co-director Sophie. I was wondering, like, you know, now that you've kind of been in film in different ways and different, you know, music and politics, like how is the kind of process of collaboration different in these different kind of, you know, art forms? Or like, how's collaboration different in like political movements versus being in a band or in Chumbawamba, or, you know, and how is collaboration different in making a film?
I think Sophie brought about 20 or 30 years of experience to the film. So she had all that knowledge that I was the sort of the wild card in that relationship, really. You know, it gave me, what it allowed is for me to be as ridiculous or as crazy as I wanted to be, because then she would take that idea and make it work, or take that idea and say, no, I don't think we can do that. Like I was going to go off on a tangent there just to talk about the scene where I'm talking to myself, where there's 4 of me. Mm-hmm. You know, I just said, look, I've seen this thing where this guy talks to himself, and there's loads of him. It's brilliant. And so I showed her it, and she was like, yeah, that's good. It's really clever. And I was like, look, there's a scene where I tried to get the band to talk about signing to EMI when we were all together. And it just didn't work. It was like people were a bit sort of reluctant to talk about it, or it was a bit flat, or they couldn't understand why it would be interesting to anybody. So I thought, right, I've got to try and make that scene in a different way. And so I was like, look, let's do it like this. And so then Sophie has to go away and think, and she has to plan it and she has to work out, and it was I felt really bad in a way, because I was just like, yeah, I'll play the parts, I'll write the script, but she had to work out the logistics of it all. And so in that sense, it was similar to how, working in Chumbawamba, for instance, where people always brought different skill sets to the band. Like there's some people in the band who are fantastic musicians who I would never trust to book a minibus to get us from one place to another, because that's not what they're good at. And then there's other people who are fantastic at doing the accounts, and I would never expect them to do, like to play lead guitar on something. I don't know. It was just like we all brought different things to the band, and we're good and bad at different things. Like Alice, for instance, Alice always says, she was a writer who just happened to end up in a band. She never thought that was going to be her career, but she managed to, because she had these certain things that she was brilliant at, that she brought to the band. And one of those things was not musicianship. She's an absolutely awful musician, and she's a terrible singer, but she's a fantastic performer. And she's brilliant at dealing with the press and writing and stuff like that, So she brought all those things. And I think in a smaller way, that's what happened with me and Sophie, was that, we brought different things to the mix. And we worked, neither of us was the boss. Although my joke was always that we would talk about stuff, we would have a conversation, then we would just do what Sophie said, which was usually the case. But then I was always coming up with stupid ideas, and she would sort of like make them work or not work, I suppose.
Sounds like a fun way to go about doing things, an early, very kind of open space to kind of creatively explore ideas. Given all the kind of interesting experiences that you've had over the years, in reflection, for those that kind of want to continue to kind of make a difference out in the world, whether it be, changing, systems within the world or politics or even creatively, is there anything, even just through the making of this film, where you're like, this is the way to kind of continue to kind of keep that passion alive, that, differences can be made?
I think, my process with the film was like, I suppose what I found happened to me was that the making of the film became the thing that saved me, in a way. That I was in a low point, 5-10 years ago, and just the creative process and doing something that I believed in just really helped lift me out of that. And without even realizing it, by the time I finished the film, I was like, wow, it's weird. I feel like, I don't feel like that person and then that's what happens at the end of the film, I suppose, is I'm released from I'm released from my past, and feel as though in just finding that community of people, that I'd found a way out of the out of the mire that I was in. It's funny, really, because the film doesn't try to answer those questions, and it's different for everybody, I suppose. I think what I found on finishing the film is then me and Sophie then went off, and I do a one-man show now, which is so very similar to the film. There's a lot of similar themes and ideas in it, and we've been performing that just recently, just last week in Brighton, and the response we get to that is that people of my generation who come to see the film are going, that's my, I've had people saying, look, that I've just watched my life in front of me, and I've just thought, yeah, you're right, although I'm not saying this is the answer. I'm saying, let's question what we're doing. Let's step out of our comfort zones and let's do something, let's do something new, or do the things that we're most afraid of, or whatever it is. And I think at the bottom, the bottom line for me is that it's hard to change the world. It's really, really hard to change the world. And so I think at the end of the day, I think all you can do is that the measure is that you tried, and at least you tried. And and I suppose there's this other idea of what if somebody asks me, what can we do? I only think that the answer is whatever we can, because it's not about guilt tripping. The idea is it's not about guilt tripping people into doing something. It's about, it's about helping people realize that they're not alone, and that there are people around like them. And, for me, it's about how creativity can help, it can help me out of that situation as well, and stuff like that. And so it's those sort of ideas that I think are really important. And it's not that I think, that there's going to be a revolution anytime soon. But I think that, I think the stuff that we do at a much sort of more local, smaller level, that do make a difference. And that's the sort of the important thing for me, I suppose. And I feel, and what I've realized, what I've learned from the last 5 or 10 years as well, is that there's certain things that certain people are good at and certain things that people are bad at. And I think the thing that I would say that I was good at is is using my creativity to sort of maybe bring people together and inspire people in some way, or help people, realize that there are other people around like them and we're not alone and stuff like that. And I'm not very good in meetings or on demonstrations and stuff like that. But there's other stuff that we can all do, to be part of a bigger continuum of dissent. And I think that's what's important.
That's very cool to think about. I think this is going to be really fun film for folks in the Bay Area to see, and I think it'll be a nice catalyst for discussion. And as we kind of wrap things up, I guess a question I have for you is that we as film festivals, the thing I try to always remind our audience is that we're kind of like the grassroots street team for these independent filmmakers that are screening their films with us and early on in their life. And so, what are ways that folks who have seen the film can continue to follow the film in your work, or even to kind of help spread the word?
I don't know. We're still trying to sell the film. We're still trying to sell the film everywhere, and that's proving to be a frustrating process because it just takes so long. That's why we then, like, I had this conversation with Sophie after the film where we said, so I said to her, do you think we'll ever make another film together again now? And she just went, nah. I was like, why not? And she said, well, because I think you should be on stage, and I think you should be in front of the camera, and you should be doing stuff. You shouldn't be directing stuff. You should be like performing and stuff like that. And so I wrote this one-man show. This is all through lockdown. I wrote this one-man show. So now that's what we're doing. We're taking that on tour. So and it's called Am I Invisible Yet? And that's what we're doing now. It's just like, we're always trying to find, so we found something else to, to keep the thing alive in a way, and to keep the spark going. And it's like, and if it was a Venn diagram, the film and the play, the show would overlap massively. So we're just always trying to just think of new ways to creatively express our politics, as well as have a good time whilst we're doing it, really.
Awesome.
I don't think that answered your question, actually, but
no, but what I would probably tell the audience is just like, let people let folks know you just saw this great film, I Get Knocked Down, here at SF Doc Fest, and tell people to kind of be on the lookout for it when it hits their town. And thanks again, Dunstan. It's fun talking with you.
Okay, thanks ever so much.